Are we seeing history repeating itself today? It's a question that many have asked as they watch modern superpowers grapple with economic crises, political instability, and a world that is constantly shifting beneath their feet. Empires, from the British to the Ottoman to the Romans, once thought themselves invincible, until they weren't. History tells us that no empire, no matter how powerful, lasts forever. But what causes them to fall? While historians debate military overreach, corruption, and internal strife, two fundamental factors emerge: economic mismanagement and arrogance. These two elements, often intertwined, have been the Achilles heel of the world's greatest empires. Now let's put this into context. Imagine you own a massive company that has dominated the market for decades. You're making money hand over fist, expanding, investing, and enjoying a lavish lifestyle. But then, competitors start creeping in, technology evolves, and your strategies begin to age. Instead of adapting, you keep spending recklessly, believing that your dominance is untouchable. Eventually, your empire collapses under its own weight. Sound familiar? That's exactly what happened to the British, Ottoman, and Roman empires. Through their stories, we'll see how economic fragility and unchecked arrogance played crucial roles in their demise. And as we look around at the modern world, we must ask ourselves, are today's global powers repeating the same mistakes? Let's dive into history and uncover what happens when empires ignore the warning signs of their own downfall. At its peak, the British Empire controlled nearly a quarter of the world's land and population. It was an industrial powerhouse, pioneering global trade and exerting influence far and wide. But what happens when you grow too big, too fast, and assume your dominance is permanent? Britain's global empire came at an enormous cost. The country relied on colonial wealth and trade to sustain its economy, but its ambitions often led to costly wars. The two world wars in the 20th century were particularly devastating. The empire's military expenditures skyrocketed, and by the time World War II ended, Britain found itself deeply in debt, particularly to the United States. At the same time, maintaining an empire became financially untenable. Revolts, uprisings, and growing nationalist movements in the colonies made it increasingly expensive to rule over distant lands. Britain could no longer afford to sustain its empire, and decolonization became an inevitable process. British leaders underestimated the growing demand for independence among their colonies. They assumed that their subjects would remain loyal, and that British rule was essential for their stability. But the truth was different. As countries like India fought for independence, British arrogance blinded them to the shifting political realities. By the time Britain accepted the inevitable, the empire was already crumbling. The Ottoman Empire was one of the longest-lasting empires in history, reigning for over 600 years. However, like all empires before it, decline was inevitable. Economic mismanagement and resistance to change played a significant role in its downfall. While Europe was undergoing rapid industrialization in the 18th and 19th centuries, the Ottoman Empire remained largely reliant on outdated economic structures. The empire depended on agriculture, taxation, and trade monopolies rather than investing in industrial growth. To make matters worse, the empire relied heavily on foreign loans from European powers, placing it in a precarious economic position. Instead of generating wealth through innovation and production, the Ottomans found themselves at the mercy of foreign creditors. Ottoman rulers believed that their traditional ways were sufficient to maintain their empire. They dismissed European technological advancements, military strategies, and governance models. As nationalist movements within the empire gained momentum, the Ottomans refused to acknowledge the legitimate grievances of their subjects. Instead of reforming, they tried to suppress dissent, ultimately hastening their own downfall. By the early 20th century, after a disastrous involvement in World War I, the Ottoman Empire collapsed, leading to the formation of modern Turkey. Rome's grandeur was unmatched, ruling vast territories across Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. But even the mightiest of empires can crumble under its own weight. Economic instability and unchecked arrogance sealed Rome's fate. The Roman economy thrived on conquest. As long as the empire expanded, it had a steady flow of wealth and slaves to fuel its economy. But once expansion slowed, problems began to surface. To fund military campaigns and maintain its vast bureaucracy, Rome increased taxation on its citizens. This burden led to economic stagnation, widespread poverty, and resentment. Additionally, Rome debased its currency, leading to rampant inflation. The empire's reliance on slave labor also became an issue. Once military conquest slowed, the supply of slaves dwindled, disrupting agriculture and industry. Roman leaders believed in their empire's eternal dominance. Instead of addressing economic woes, they focused on extravagance. Lavish feasts, gladiator games, and monumental architecture took precedence over sound governance. When external threats emerged, Rome underestimated them. They dismissed the so-called barbarians until it was too late. In 410 AD, the Visigoths sacked Rome, marking a turning point in the empire's decline. By 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire had fallen. So, what can we learn from these fallen empires? Economic decline and arrogance are not separate issues. They are two sides of the same coin. Wealth breeds overconfidence. When an empire is prosperous, it assumes it will always remain on top. Complacency leads to economic mismanagement. Instead of adapting, empires stick to outdated strategies. Economic decline exposes weaknesses. When financial stability crumbles, internal and external threats become harder to contain. Arrogance prevents adaptation. Instead of addressing the issues, leaders double down on failing policies, accelerating their collapse. From Britain's colonial overreach to the Ottomans' refusal to modernize to Rome's economic recklessness, history demonstrates that unchecked arrogance combined with financial mismanagement leads to inevitable downfall. So back to our original question. Are we seeing history repeat itself today? It's hard to ignore the parallels between these historical empires and modern global powers. Economic crises, reckless spending, and a belief in unshakable dominance echo the same patterns seen in past empires. The key difference? The world moves at a much faster pace today. Global economies are deeply interconnected, and financial instability can spread rapidly. The lesson is clear: adapt or decline. Whether it's an ancient empire or a modern superpower, those that ignore history's warnings are doomed to repeat its failures. If you found this deep dive into history eye-opening, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe for more fascinating breakdowns. And I want to hear from you. Are we witnessing history repeat itself? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's get the conversation started.